Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience. I'm here tonight with my full review of the Hifiman Sundara closeback. This was loaned to me for review by Hifiman, and it currently sells through Hifiman for $399 US. This is a wired, full-size, over-the-ear, closeback headphone. And before I get into the details and the specifications and all that, I did want to mention that I did struggle a little bit with this review. And the reason why is when I did my first impressions, I had this headphone maybe about 3 days at that time. I did like it quite a bit, and that hasn't really changed. I still do like it, but there was something about it that it didn't sound quite like some of my other headphones. And if you're expecting this to sound just like the Sundara, but a closed back version of it, it doesn't really sound a lot like the Sundara. I'm not sure if naming this the Sundara was the right choice for Hifiman because, I think a lot of people are expecting this to sound just like the Sundara, but be closed back, which gives you the isolation and, keep sound out, keep sound in, all that. It does sound similar to the Sundara, but there are quite a few differences. And what I've noticed is, and I can't really judge a headphone just listening to it by itself. I have to compare it to other headphones that I've had for a while, my references, because I guess it's my brain quickly adjusts to the sound of a headphone or a headphone amp or whatever. Even if it's a little bit different, my brain quickly adjusts and compensates for any differences. So when I listen to this, I really do like it. It's a good sounding headphone. But when I compared it to some other headphones like the Sundara open back, I noticed there were some differences. In some ways, I thought the Sundara sounded a little better. So, and then I usually don't do this, but I watched a few reviews by other people that did review this headphone, and some really liked it, and some didn't like it. And so I had to spend a while with this, comparing it back and forth to a few different headphones, trying to figure out what it was I liked about this headphone and what I didn't like. And there's a few small things that I'm not crazy about, but overall, it is a good headphone. So I'm not saying that this isn't, every Hifiman headphone I've reviewed so far I've liked, but this one is a little bit different. It is the first closeback Hifiman I've reviewed. I'm going to go ahead and give you the specifications and the details, and then I'll talk to you about the sound in a couple minutes. This is a planar magnetic driver headphone, and it uses stealth magnets like most of the Hifiman headphones that are coming out nowadays. And if you don't know what stealth magnets are, they basically, a planar magnetic headphone has magnetic bars that run across a diaphragm, usually on both sides. And it used to be where most of these magnets were either square or rectangle if you looked at them from the end. Well, anyway, the stealth magnets are like a half circle. They're rounded on one side, and the idea behind that is to have a smoother surface for the sound waves to travel over, getting to your ear, which should, in theory, cause less distortion. So the impedance of this headphone is a very low 20 ohms, and the sensitivity is a high 98 decibels at 1 milliwatt, so it is pretty easy to drive, although being only 20 ohms, it can require quite a bit of current from your amp. So I'm not sure, if a phone or something like that, I don't have a phone that I can use with this, but it doesn't take a whole lot of power. It's fairly easy, especially for a planar magnetic, but not as easy as most of your lower impedance dynamic driver headphones. Anyway, Hifiman claims a weight of 432 grams, and on my scale, it actually came out at a lighter 413 grams. So for a full-size closed-back headphone, this is actually pretty light. Around 400 grams is usually where most full-size headphones go. they can go up from there. You know, I've reviewed headphones as heavy as 600 grams. So, like I said, for a full-size closed back, this is actually pretty light. The build quality looks good. There's no, flaws, any defects, and it is a comfortable headphone. The clamping pressure just seems about just right for me. Ear cups cover my entire ears. I don't feel like my ears are cramped up or anything. The openings are fairly large. The headphone doesn't move around. If I tip my head or shake whatever, I don't ever feel like it's going to fall off. And the weight is pretty, like I said, not that heavy. The headband is basically the same as on the Sundara, and I will move in and show you this headphone a little closer. You can see the headband, which is just basically a metal steel frame, which has quite a bit of spring, but like I said, that the clamping force isn't excessive. You got little notches here where you adjust your height up and down. There's a little bit of flex, just enough that it'll, fit to your head where you don't have any sound leaks or anything. It does swivel this way. The ear pads are tapered. You can see they're, I believe this is a synthetic leather on the outside and a cloth material. On the inside, they are very soft, and I'm not sure, but I think this is memory foam. It seems to bounce back pretty slow when you push on it. But like I said, they are very comfortable. As far as isolation, they don't do an exceptional job as far as keeping sound out. I can hear people talking. I've heard headphones that do a better job of keeping the outside sound out of the headphones, but these actually do a pretty good job of keeping the sound inside the headphones. I can have the music fairly loud and you can barely hear it outside the headphones. If I have the music going, take them off, and push the ear pads together like that, I can just barely hear the music, and it's quiet enough it's not going to bother anyone at all. Oh, I did want to show you, it has your standard 3.5 millimeter connections on each ear cup, and the cable that comes with it is your standard Hifiman detachable cable. It's a rubberized material. It's about 5 feet long. Has your 3.5 millimeter connections at the headphone, and standard for Hifiman, this is the same cable that came on the Sundara, on the Edition XS, on several of their headphones. But anyway, you've got your 3.5 millimeter connection at the amp end with a 90-degree bend, and then it comes with your 6.3 millimeter or 1/4 inch adapter. Before I get into the sound of this, I just wanted to mention that the music I used to I'm sorry, I'm straightening out my shirt a little bit. I can see it in the camera. Anyway, the music I've reviewed this headphone with is a mixture of different types of rock, some pop, some electronic, and mostly acoustic music. I really like acoustic music and, natural sounding instruments, and especially female vocals to review headphones. It takes a good headphone to reproduce a natural sound of an acoustic guitar, of pianos, things like that, and especially female voices. It just takes a really good headphone. That's what separates the good headphones from the average, and the great headphones is how well they can reproduce the female voice and make it sound natural, make it sound real, make it sound like you're right there, not listening to a recording, but listening to a voice, actually in the same room live. And so it's a real good way to judge a headphone's quality, even amp stacks, all that. Most of my music, my source was a Cambridge Audio CD transport. And I used a couple of, actually a few different DACs and amps. I ran the CD transport as a digital signal into either the Topping D70S MQA version of their DAC. I ran that into Topping A90 discrete amp, or the LSA Hyperdrive 2 amp, which is a hybrid tube. I also used the FIO K9 Pro ESS, which is a combination DAC and amp. and also the Hifiman EF400 combination R2R DAC and amp. And then as far as headphones that I compared directly to the Sundara closed back would be the Sundara open back. And I did want to mention that my Sundara is the 2019 version. It's not the latest version. I haven't heard the newer version, and I don't know how much different it is, but I was using a 2019 version in my comparison. So anyway, getting into the sound of the Hifiman closed back Sundara. I would describe the sound as basically neutral with a slight bump in the mid bass, a little bit of emphasis in the mid bass. Maybe I would say compared to the Sundara Open, maybe a 4 or 5 decibel bump in the mid bass. And when I say neutral, to me, the Hifiman Sundara is a perfect example of a neutral headphone. Really, a real flat frequency response with no real, emphasis or bumps anywhere or any dips. So basically, like I said, just a little bit of an emphasis in the mid bass compared to the Sundara. The frequency extension, I would say, is good on both ends, but not exceptional. This does have decent extension into the sub bass, but it doesn't go super low. It doesn't get as low as the Edition XS. On the top, it has good extension into the treble, but this is not a bright headphone. A lot of people considered the Sundara to be a little on the bright side. The treble is tamed down a little bit from the Sundara open back. Well, at least the version I have. The clarity and detail on this headphone is very good, but it's not the absolute last word. There are some headphones that are a little more detailed, but like I said, it's very good. I don't feel it's lacking in detail, and when I'm listening to it, it sounds really good to me. It's just when I compare it to some other headphones are able to squeeze out a little bit more detail in the music, and I'll talk about that in a minute in my comparisons. Starting with the sub bass, there is sub bass, but it doesn't go super low, but it is there. You do hear the sub bass. It just doesn't have any real emphasis and not a whole lot of weight behind the sub bass. But the mid bass on this, there is a little bit of an emphasis. It's got a pretty good punch and a pretty good slam to the mid bass, and definitely has a little bit of weight to the mid bass. This is a pretty dynamic headphone, and you especially notice that in the mid bass. Getting into the mids, I would consider the mids to be basically neutral, but female vocals to me sound just a little bit thin, a little bit dry, and actually at times, not always, but at times, depending on the recording, depending who I'm listening to, the female vocals can actually sound a little bit shouty to me. And by shouty, what I mean is like if you're yelling to someone off at a distance and you cup your hands to funnel that sound towards them, it kind of changes the tone. And that's sort of the way they can sound to me at times. It's not all the time, it just depends on the music. I was listening to some Sarah McLachlan, and a few of her songs, her voice sounded a little shouty, and also some Natalie Merchant. At times, her voice sounded a little bit shouty also. The imaging is very good. The soundstage it's not quite as wide as the Sundara, but it's real good for a closed back headphone. And I'll compare this directly to the Sundara in a second, and I'll go into that a little bit deeper. The dynamics are good. This headphone's got a nice punchy sound, especially in the mid bass. And so I guess I'll get into my comparisons. I'll start first with the Sundara, or the Sundara Open. And comparing the two, starting with the sub bass, this headphone does go a little bit lower than the Sundara Open. Sub bass is not a strong point of the open back Sundara. In the mid bass, this headphone has definitely has more weight to the mid bass. It has more weight, more punch, a more dynamic sounding mid bass that hits a little harder than the Sundara. So in that respect, this headphone definitely does have an advantage over the open back. I actually prefer the mid-range of the Sundara a little bit over this headphone. It just, especially like I mentioned a minute ago, the female vocals with the Sundara open back, the vocals they're just slightly warmer, but just sound a little bit more liquid, a little bit more, just slightly richer, but there just seems to be more detail in the voices, a little bit more texture, and less of that shouty sound. It's just more pleasant. Without a doubt, I do enjoy the sound of female vocals better with the open back Sundara than I have. They're not bad on this headphone, but like I said, just a little bit thin, a little bit dry, and a little shouty at times. So, like I said, if you're going from the Sundara open back, expecting this headphone to sound exactly the same, but more bass, the mid-range is different. And then, like I said, the mid-range just sounds a little bit cleaner, a little bit more detailed, and like I said, just more texture and just a little bit more pleasant on the open back to me. And getting into the treble, a lot of people had a little bit of issue with the Sundara, saying it was a little bit bright. The treble is toned down just a little bit on this headphone from the open back Sundara. Just a little less sparkle, but a little easier. It's the Sundara open back can get a little bit fatiguing at times on music that has bright treble, where this one, the treble's tamed down just a little bit. Okay, I compared this headphone to the Edition XS, which actually sells for $100 more than this headphone. It is an open back, like the Sundara open back, but the Sundara open back is $100 cheaper than this headphone, where the Edition XS is $100 more. It is a step up. Okay, the strong point of the Edition XS is it has good bass extension and a good solid sub bass on it, even better than the Ananda or the Ananda Stealth. It goes low for some reason, and I'm not sure why, because it's an open back, and there aren't too many open back headphones that do have good sub bass, but the Edition XS does. So the Edition XS definitely beats out the Sundara closed back as far as sub bass extension and sub bass weight. But when you get to the mid bass, I think that the Sundara closed back actually beats out the Edition XS, because the weight of the bass is kind of the same, maybe a slight advantage with the closed back Sundara, but the big difference is the Edition XS, in my opinion, has a soft sound. It's not a very dynamic headphone, where this headphone, especially in the mid bass, is a lot more dynamic. So this headphone, to me, sounds like it hits quite a bit harder in the mid bass than the Edition XS. Okay, getting up into the mid range, the Edition XS definitely has a warmer, richer, more of a lush mid range, and especially female vocals, I think they sound quite a bit not only warmer, more liquid, more texture, but just a lot more pleasant, a lot nicer to listen to on the Edition XS. Not that they're bad on this headphone, but the Edition XS does have a really nice warm mid-range. This headphone, the mid-range is a little bit more upfront, a little more in your face. a little bit more detailed, where the Edition XS, the mid-range, is a little further off in the distance and doesn't bring out quite the detail that this headphone does. And then getting into the treble, I think the two, the Edition XS and the Sundara Closeback, are similar in treble. I also wanted to try this or compare this to another headphone, and I realize it's not an entirely fair comparison because this other headphone is twice the price. So I did compare this to the LSA HP2 Ultra, and the reason why is that was the only closeback that I had in a similar price range. And like I said, it is twice the price. This headphone sells for $399. The last I checked, the LSA HP2 Ultra sold for $799. Okay, the HP2 is a dynamic driver. It is quite a bit easier to drive. It needs very little power. I think that the HP2 is actually a little bit lighter. It's very comfortable. And in case you don't know, that was made for LSA by Kennerton, and it's similar to the Magni. Well, it was kind of an upgrade of the Magni headphone. Actually more similar to the Kennerton. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I think it's Jalahorn or Galahorn or something like that. But anyway, the LSA HP2 was my headphone of the year 2 years ago, and it was my favorite pick of headphone under $1,000 last year. So it is a headphone I really, really like. Well, comparing this to the HP2 Ultra, sub-bass, the HP2 pretty much blows this headphone away. The HP2 has really good sub-bass, really good extension into the sub-bass, and quite a bit of weight to it, but yet very tight and well controlled. So as far as sub-bass, really no comparison. Getting into the mid-bass, they're actually kind of similar, the two. In fact, the Sundara Closed might beat out the HP2 a little bit in the mid-bass with a little bit more, slightly more weight and a little bit more punch in the mid-bass. Getting into the mid-range, they both have a similar, I would say, neutral sound to the mid-range, and the tone of the mid-range is actually pretty close. But the HP2 has a lot more detail in the mid-range, and female vocals sound cleaner with more detail on the Sundara. But like I said, once again, this headphone is twice the price of the Sundara. Okay, and then getting into the treble, I would say the HP2 has a little better extension into the treble, a little more sparkle to the treble, a little more detail. So is this headphone as good as the HP2 from LSA? No. In my opinion, it is not as good, but it's half the price. So is it good for the price? Yeah. I haven't reviewed any other closeback headphones under $500, so I can't really tell you, is this a good closeback headphone for under $500, because I just, I review what's sent to me, for review. And this year, Hi-Fi Man's been great as far as providing me headphones. And there's a lot of other headphones I'd love to review that are out there, but I can't go out and buy all these headphones to do reviews. And I kind of count on, these companies to loan me headphones, for review. And, there's some companies that just haven't sent me anything yet. And, I'd love to review some of these other headphones in this price, but that just hasn't been, just hasn't happened yet. So hopefully it will in the near future. So what do I like about this headphone? I do like this headphone. It's a good headphone. And even though, there are some small things about it that aren't ideal in my opinion, my brain very quickly adjusts to the small differences. And when I'm listening to this headphone, I don't hear any problems. It's not till I compare it to other headphones that I find out that other headphones might have a little more bass extension, might have a little bit more detail, might might be a little better in some way, but overall this is a well-balanced headphone and it does sound good. And when I listen to it, I enjoy it. So, and like I said, this is a closed back headphone that you can listen to without bothering other people around you, and it's fairly easy to drive. But like I said, it's got a punchy, dynamic mid bass. It has good detail and clarity, not the absolute last word, but good detail and clarity. And it has good isolation as far as keeping the music in the headphone. Excuse me, just a second. I do heat with wood and it gets dry in my house, and 15-20 minutes of talking and I get pretty dehydrated. So anyway, dislikes. For a closed back, I'd be happy if the sub bass went a little deeper and had a little more weight to it, but it's not bad. Female vocals, like I said, can sound just a little bit on the thin side, a little bit on the dry side, but once again, not bad, and I get used to it very quickly. It's not until I compare it to a headphone that has a warmer mid-range that I realize that there is a little bit of an issue there. And that's about it. I mean, it's a comfortable headphone. It's, the price isn't that bad, $399. I realize that isn't cheap, but, compared to a lot of headphones out there, I mean, I would say now, a few years ago, $399 was basically considered mid-fi, but now, I think people consider, $600-700 headphones mid-fi, so this is kind of somewhere between budget and mid-fi, lower mid-fi, but like I said, it's a good headphone. I do like it. I'm not going to tell you I don't like this headphone. Some people out there really criticize this headphone because it didn't sound just like the Sundara. I guess it wasn't, I don't think it's a bad headphone, it's just not what some people were expecting. So, they criticized it for that reason. And I don't think this headphone really deserves criticism. It's a good headphone. I just think maybe if Hi-Fi Man had named it something other than the Sundara, maybe people would have gone into listening to this headphone with a more open mind and not criticized it because it didn't sound just like the Sundara or exactly what they were expecting. So anyway, do I recommend this headphone? Yeah, it's a nice headphone. It's not perfect in every way, but it's a good headphone. And I did want to mention that using the Hi-Fi Man EF400 amp and DAC, which is an R2 DAC with a nice warm sound to it, this headphone does sound really good with that amp. That extra warmth that amp DAC provides warms up the mid-range and makes it sound more pleasant, makes it sound better. So this is actually works really well with the EF400, and that's an amp DAC I really like, and probably going to hear about that one on my best of the year video that I'm going to I'm going to do that in 3 parts again this year, and I'm going to be working on that in the very near future. I'm hoping to get started on that in the next few days. Probably the first part's probably going to be headphones. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And the Hi-Fi or the headphone experience over on Facebook is up to like 20.5 thousand members. It's been growing really fast lately. So you're all welcome to join us over there. And once again, thanks for watching my video.